You green dweebs think you got the best of old Bebop, do you? Well, you're all wrong. Cause Bebop's the best there is!
And that little piggy ran where?
All the way home.
Yeah, but he dropped something on the way. What is it, Don? Cash, and lots of it. But why rob a bank just to leave the money behind?
Yeah, no kidding. Imagine what someone could do with all that loot.
Hello? Rupert's Pizzeria? Yeah, I'd like to order 2,000 extra large cheese and pepperoni specials and 5,000 orders of breadsticks for pickup, please. Never mind, dude. Wrong number.
If you asked me who my favorite game developers are, I'd tell you without hesitation that it's Platinum Games. And if you ask me who my favorite comic book characters are growing up, I'd tell you the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So when I heard that Platinum was going to make a game based on the Ninja Turtles, I was definitely hyped up. Sadly, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutants in Manhattan, turned out to be Platinum's worst received game, and I finally played it to understand why. I had been sitting on playing Mutants in Manhattan for so long because I knew about its reputation, but I still always wanted to experience it firsthand. Unfortunately, it was delisted from Steam's shelves a year or so back, along with a handful of other licensed games Activision published. The delisted games are now half the price they were a year back if you can find a hard copy in GameStop. I have this theory about Platinum's design philosophy. They make games iteratively. The company was established by former Capcom devs under the now-defunct Clover brand, and you can draw a line from their latest titles directly through their body of work, and most of the mechanics their games have today come from the games they made as Clover. I say this because I'll tell you right off the bat that, no, Mutant in Manhattan isn't worth playing. It's earned that mixed rating on Steam. The controls are passable for a Platinum action game, but what really makes it a deal-breaker is the mission design. Even among the licensed titles Platinum did for Activision, it feels the most undercooked. But even if the game is a stinker, I think it's worth talking about because I can see what Platinum took from Mutants in Manhattan and incorporated it into the following title, their 2017 hit Nier Automata. When you think of Platinum games, what titles spring to mind? Nier Automata, Bayonetta, Metal Gear Rising, and Vanquish for me personally. These games all share mechanics, systems, and visual design that are elements of Platinum's house style. Snappy combat with an emphasis on defensive abilities that can lead into offensive combos, over-the-top set pieces that get you hyped up for the visual spectacle, and slick visual design that is appealing to look at but also clean enough to provide the player enough visual and audible feedback so that they can make split-second decisions. Mutants in Manhattan falls short on all three fronts. The one thing I genuinely love about Mutants in Manhattan is its art style. It's cel-shaded in a way that harkens back to the franchise's comic book roots, and in some shots I could see it resembling a Telltale adventure game. The turtles themselves have all been given a good amount of detail, so that even though they have a uniform of sorts, there's enough variation in their proportions and in how they wear their gear so that you can tell which turtle you're playing at any given time. It also helps that their weapons glow in their favorite colors during combat. The art style really shines in the boss designs. Everyone here looks really good, and Platinum cherry-picked from several Ninja Turtles titles to provide the Rogues Gallery mutants. Some are staples from the original Mirage Comics run in the '86 cartoon show, and some are from the Archie Comics line. I've said that Platinum likes to draw from their older titles when developing their games, and that also means that they like to make visual references to past games. I swear, these two bosses are meant to call back to Grand Bruce and Charles III from Beautiful Joe, which if true is a cute touch since that game also had a cel-shaded comic book art style. My favorite visual gag in Mutants is how Donnie's staff strikes are rendered so that they look like animation smears. If we're going to describe Mutants in Manhattan's combat, we need to set up a baseline for Platinum-style controls. Some combination of the top three base buttons will be the light and heavy attack buttons, and an action button that lets the player perform context-sensitive actions. The shoulder buttons will usually provide some defensive action, like dodging or blocking, and the rest of the shoulder buttons will perform other miscellaneous actions like manual aim or a ranged attack. Usually, a game will emphasize one defensive style over another. Bayonetta focuses on dodging attacks, and Metal Gear Rising is all about parrying. However, there will also be an item or skill that allows the player to perform the alternate action. Bayonetta has an artifact that lets the player parry incoming hits, and Metal Gear Rising has a skill you can buy in its shop that will let you dodge any attack, including unblockable moves. Platinum's Activision games follow the same style, but since they're based on children's media, their challenging controls have been simplified to appeal to a younger crowd. The best way I could describe them would be, if you had a kid and wanted to get them into action games, these would be some good examples to introduce them into the character action genre. Well, all of them except Mutants in Manhattan. Mutants has all of those basic features I described earlier: a weak and strong attack, an action button, and a defensive ability. Here, rather than commit to one style or another, Platinum decided to make it so that the turtles could perform either a dodge or a parry with the same input. If you press the button as an enemy attacks, you'll sweep under their attack and have a split-second prompt to tell you to press the action button to initiate a back attack. If you hold the button and then let go as soon as an attack connects, you'll parry the attack instead and break the enemy's combo. I get why they did this. Killer is Dead had a similar style where the dodge button could also serve as a parry button, depending on when you pressed it as an enemy attacked. The idea was to have a very forgiving combat system and give players multiple options during the flow of a fight. Killer is Dead also has the same problems as Mutants in Manhattan, where if you map too many abilities to the same button, it makes it difficult for the player to consistently expect the same results again and again during the hectic pace of combat. To compare Mutants' defensive mechanics with similar games, The Legend of Korra is the first of Platinum's Activision games, and its control scheme has it so that dodge and block are on opposite triggers. This means that there shouldn't be any confusion as to what the player wants to do in combat. If they press the dodge button, they'll dodge an attack, and if they press the block button, they'll block the attack. At first, it seems like Korra is trying to have an equal focus on both defensive styles, but it's actually more about blocking, since blocking just as an enemy attack connects will initiate a parry, and you can do follow-up attacks to interrupt enemy combos and cause collateral damage in big fights. Dodging is there for unblockable attacks, so the player can safely avoid damage and continue their combos. Transformers Devastation is the second licensed title Platinum did for Activision, and it plays like Bayonetta Light. You press the dodge button to avoid attacks, and if you time it just as an attack connects, you'll enter focus mode, which is Devastation's version of Witch Time. You can buy a skill in the lab to parry incoming hits, much like how in Metal Gear Rising you can buy the dodge skill in the Doctor's shop. The dodge button in Devastation also has other functions. If you perform specific combos, you can end them with a flourish by pressing the dodge button when a prompt flashes on screen. This is similar to Wicked Weaves in Bayonetta. The dodge button is also how the Transformers change between vehicle and humanoid forms. Devastation's dodging is a much more consistent system than Mutants and Manhattan's, but it also has problems with having too many actions mapped to the same button. There's a ground pound ability that requires a player to jump in the air in walking mode and then transform just before they land, but you have to do it during a neutral jump. If there's any lateral movement during the action, the player will just transform into vehicle mode. Ground pounding requires a player to be momentarily stationary in a game that's all about movement. Devastation's car attacks are snappier in response and more forgiving with input compared to Mutants and Manhattan's back attack. You not only have to dodge an attack, but you also have to press the action button to initiate the back attack. It's supposed to be like in Metal Gear Rising, when you cut an enemy in half and have to press the action button to perform a Zandatsu, but because you're never sure whether you're going to dodge an attack or parry it, you're never prepared for the prompt. With MGR, you have to go into Blade Mode to cut an enemy, and you only get a chance to use Blade Mode once you've stunned an enemy with your parry. There's enough breathing room between actions to see the prompt and pull it off. Devastation also has the same kind of padding between car attack prompts. It's very easy to initiate the dodge in Mutants, but before I could even register that I set up the back attack, I was already queuing up my inputs to continue my combo, so I missed a ton of opportunities for back attacks. When it comes to being consistent in Mutants in Manhattan, I can consistently choose whether I want to dodge or parry in a one-on-one fight, but one-on-one fights are rare, and it doesn't help that you always have all four turtles on the same field regardless of whether you're playing with co-op online or just by yourself in the AI. Too many things are happening at once, and Mutants' clean art style doesn't help to filter out the visual noise the screen gets from the energy blasts and enemy attacks. that come out from every angle. Having all 4 turtles active is one of the big things that hurts Mutant's design. I'm not sure if this was one of those mandates from the publishers, but the game feels like it was built with co-op as a primary feature. You can connect with 3 other players so that every turtle has someone controlling them, or you could go solo and swap out turtles during gameplay. The worst thing about the game is that all of the turtles are squishy. It doesn't take much to put any one of the brothers in critical condition, and if one of them loses all their health, they're sent back home to scarf down as much pizza as they can to respawn. You don't get to see that in single player mode, so all you really see are your brothers getting wiped out, and you have to run over to their shells and revive them before they go to timeout. I will say that the AI is pretty competent when it comes to reviving each other and the player. If you wipe out in single player, you'll take over as another turtle. If all the turtles wipe, then you lose a continue, which is a weird as hell holdover from the Turtles arcade games. The back or select button opens up the command menu, which is where you tell the AI in single player how you want them to behave in game. They can follow your lead, go ahead of you, and initiate combat, or defend you while you're completing an objective. Switching between turtles requires a combination of button presses. There's a button that modifies the functions of the face buttons in the D-pad, which is primarily for using items during combat. You can use it to perform special abilities or switch between turtles during combat. I almost never thought about switching between turtles because, even though they look unique, they more or less play the same, with the exception of ninjutsus. Ninjutsus are special abilities each turtle can perform. Each turtle has 4 slots for ninjutsu that you can use by holding down the ninjutsu button and pressing the corresponding base button. Ninjutsu feels like an expansion on Transformers' unique abilities each Autobot could do, which was a specific action that had a cooldown timer. Ninjutsus are touch and go for me. I get why they're a thing. Every turtle can bring an ability to a fight that will help them either fight the enemy or support the other turtles, but some of them are pretty bizarre, and you can actually have turtles share the same ability at times. Leo just has Zawarudo by default, and Mikey can do a cheer animation to reset everyone's cooldowns. This just made it so that I ended up sticking with either Leo or Donnie since they had really useful ninjutsus, and I supplemented them with healing abilities, so I could stack them during big fights. You can upgrade the potency of these attacks and buy new ones in the shop whenever you reach manholes in the game. I hope you've noticed how many actions require multiple button presses, and how easily that can get confusing for someone. It sucks because both Korra and Transformers had better ways of switching between abilities and characters, and both games precede Mutants. Korra had 4 different combat styles. They were called bending since this is a game set in the Avatar universe, and the player could cycle between these styles by pressing the shoulder buttons. It was practically seamless and made it so that a player could start a combo in one style and finish in another. Each bending style had a focus on different types of combat. Firebending was the fast-moving crowd control style, earthbending was a heavy hitter style, airbending was all about collateral damage, and waterbending was the basic style that served as a workhorse for most of the game. Imagine playing a Turtles game and being able to set up combos as Leo, and then switching over to Raph to lay down big damage. This would not only feel more fluid, but it would also serve to make each turtle distinct, since their fighting styles and personalities would be expressed in the mechanics. Transformers Devastation had it so that you could select which Autobot you wanted to play as at the start of each mission, and you could swap out in-game if you entered an ARC node. This is a simpler method since the game was a single-player experience, so the controls are easier to manage, since there isn't any need to issue commands or use multiple abilities. This is a lot to describe when it comes to combat, and if only focused on the player's side. Because you'll always have 4 turtles active, a lot of the fights feel protracted, and most of the elite tier enemies are beefed up to pad out the combat. The most extreme cases are the boss fights, which have multiple health bars. That's not too big a deal. Again, I can see the Beautiful Joe influences here. But because of the 4 turtles thing, bosses on normal will have 7 levels to their health bars, and 9 on hard. To compound this, on hard mode, you can get opportunities to fight 2 bosses at once, and that adds to the grade at the end of each mission. If you wipe out during those fights, you'll miss out on the opportunity to fight those secondary bosses unless you restart the mission. Speaking of missions, progression in Mutants in Manhattan was weird as hell. Not just in mission, but in how missions unlocked. You beat the first story mission, and a handful open up afterwards. I guess it's meant to be open-ended up until the very end where the last 3 stages are locked, but the story progression feels like you're meant to just go one after the other down the list. I said earlier that the mission design was the worst thing about Mutants, and here's why. Every mission is the same. You're put in a large hub stage where enemies spawn in procedurally, and you can engage them in combat on your own time or sneak by them if you just want to blitz through the mission. The thing is, you have to wait for April to contact you and send you coordinates so that you can do activities in the level that will fill up a bar at the top of the screen. You can't reach the boss and finish the stage unless you fill up that bar, so you have to wander around the map and wait for instructions. These activities fall into a handful of categories. You'll either fight off some thugs, survive a wave of thugs for a set amount of time, take an item from one location and drop it off to another while dealing with thugs, or interact with a stationary item while fending off waves of thugs. It's really the laziest way to pad out gameplay, and this is the thing that hurts Mutants in Manhattan's appeal for me. I can put up a sloppy combat, and will most likely find a way to game the systems once I have enough experience with them, but I can't stand the way the gameplay is set up to be procedurally generated. Korra had linear levels that were sprawling, but it always felt like I was making progress through those levels. Transformers Devastation has an open-ended city layout, like Mutants in Manhattan, but there were clear plot points in the story to explain why you had to go somewhere to do something. The Turtles game really does feel like you're spinning your wheels until the next alert pops up. Devastation also had similar moments where you had to fend off waves of enemies for a set amount of time, but because of the way missions and levels were laid out to be linear, they felt more like set pieces instead of busy work. Also, they did more for the characters because every time something required technical expertise, Wheeljack had to do the repair or hacking while the rest of the team played defense. In Mutants in Manhattan, every turtle can disarm a bomb or hack a computer, which I've found weird since that should be Donnie's field. If Mutants had it so that you could select which turtle to play as, and the mission was built around their skills and character, I think the game would be a stronger product. Raph could be the traditional character action game character. Donnie could be the one who sabotages machinery. Leo could have stealth combat that would focus more on Metal Gear Rising's underutilized stealth mechanics. And Mikey could have done parkour and platforming challenges. While stealth is on my mind, it's weird how there is stealth in Mutants in Manhattan, but it's even more basic than what it was in Metal Gear Rising. It's purely line of sight by enemies, and if you get an attack without alerting your presence, the screen will flash blue to indicate a takedown. You can activate Turtle Glass, the game's answer to Detective Vision, or, I guess more appropriately, AR mode from Metal Gear Rising, and you'll be able to see through walls and identify hostile targets. This is also how you can find out where the next activity is on the map when April contacts you. I think I've done a good enough job to not sell anybody on playing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutants in Manhattan. But I also said it was worth talking about the lessons Platinum took from this game and from the other Activision titles and applied them to Nier Automata. Nier Automata is a sequel to Nier and shares the same creative director, Yoko Taro. Even though Automata is a continuation of the themes and overall design of the first Nier, and has the same combat director as Metal Gear Rising, I was able to see elements from Platinum's Activision games in there as well. Korra, Devastation, and Mutants in Manhattan all have items you can equip that will provide passive abilities during gameplay. These items are randomly generated and can have varying percentages of efficacy. These were repurposed as a chip system in Nier Automata. While you can only carry a set amount of items in the Activision games, Automata expands on the mechanic by allowing you to expand your storage space for chips, and to even have chips for UI elements, like displaying your health meter in the mini-map. The D-pad's utility is both expanded and simplified in Automata. Korra and Mutants mapped items you could use during combat to the D-pad, and Devastation had it so that you could switch your equipped weapons. Automata's D-pad has it so that up lets you switch out of which of the two loadouts in your equipment screen you want to use during combos. Left and right cycle between the different pod units you can acquire in-game, and down opens up the quick use item menu for restoratives and other one-time use support items. The level design for the open world is where I really started to see the influences from Transformers Devastation and Mutants in Manhattan. Most of Platinum's games back then were more linear, with hallways that led into open arenas. Transformers Devastation and Mutants in Manhattan had more verticality and emphasis on traversal in their level design. Automata took that hub world layout from Mutants and combined it with a dense city layout of Devastation, and made them interconnected like in the first Nier, but now everything's seamless and there's no screen transitions between regions. Those enemies that would spawn in Devastation and Mutants feel more natural in Automata because of its post-apocalyptic setting, and the idea that the machines are now more like the fauna in this new landscape. In the early game, the machines out in the wild are much more docile compared to the ones in the factory or the desert. What adds to this is that some machines are not only neutral, but friendly, and you can have dialogue with some of them, and even run errands for them. Devastation and Mutants had range attacks as well as melee attacks, and the one thing I'm glad Platinum learned going from Transformers to Ninja Turtles is that you shouldn't have ammo counts in action games where you can't guarantee ammo drops. Both games have concessions for going into aiming mode during gameplay by putting the player into a state of bullet time and having very generous auto-targeting. Automata addresses all of these issues with the pod unit. It is an option that follows the player and is tied to the camera's movement. It fires directly at whatever the camera points to, or whatever target the player locks onto, and it has infinite ammo. Along with that, the pod units can perform special actions known as pod programs, which are a callback to the spells Grimoire Weiss could learn in the first Nier, but they're also the unique abilities from Transformers Devastation and the ninjutsu from Mutants in Manhattan, down to having cooldown timers for every program. You can find a handful of pod units in the game, and give them each a program, so that during combat, you can rotate through pods and use their programs, and you can repeat this process once their cooldowns rest. Playing through Transformers Devastation, there were set pieces that had cameras locked to specific angles, much like in Nier Automata, and I have to wonder if these games were the testing grounds for the systems that have fully realized in Automata. While Korra and Transformers had a good amount of set pieces to keep the action fresh, Mutants in Manhattan didn't really have much going for it until the final levels. At one point, you need to fight Krang's robot soldiers, and they're the strongest standard enemies in the game. Once you defeat one, you can have a turtle ride it, almost like a mech. By the end of the mission, you should have all 4 turtles riding a Krang droid for the boss fight. This set piece made me think about all those times in Automata when you were able to use a flight unit. It's not because they share the same controls, they don't, by the way, but the idea of having a vehicle to ride in during battle is what stuck with me. Also, the way the Krang droids animate look very similar to the medium biped units in Automata. So, did I really play through 3 low-budget licensed games just to see how they influenced a more popular and much better designed licensed game? Yeah, because I really do think Platinum iterates on their mechanics and tries to do new things with old concepts. I've been looking at the trailers for their upcoming title, Astral Chain, and I already see the things they fleshed out from Automata's design. I still have some big holes in my knowledge of their games. I never had Wonderful 101 and Star Fox Zero, and those games came out around the same time as their Activision stuff. So there are most likely things in Automata that come from those Activision games, and they've just gone over my head. I really like Platinum games. They make my favorite kind of action games, even though every one of them will have some kind of obtuse mechanic that can be really challenging for me to pull off. They're a studio with a specific vision and house style that always manages to be interesting, even if the end result may not always wind up a success. And I think Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutants in Manhattan, is a case where, even if the game isn't a success, it can be a lesson for the next game.
Thanks for playing.
Thanks for playing. Thanks for playing. Thanks for playing.
Thanks for playing, dudes and dudettes.
Thank you for playing.